It was a cold, eerie night, and the old morgue stood silent, as if time itself had abandoned the building. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, whispering strange secrets into the desolate halls. The place had served as a final stop for countless bodies over the years, but tonight the stillness was suffocating. Only 2 guards were left to watch over the darkened corridors, Salem and Camel. They had spent years working the night shift at this place, so they knew every room, every corner. But tonight, something was different. Salem started his usual round, walking through the dimly lit hallways, checking the locked doors, and listening to the faint creaks of the building settling. Camel followed behind him, unusually quiet. It wasn't like Camel to stay silent for this long, but the tension in the air was almost palpable. The cold was biting, sharper than any other night, and the sounds, something about the sounds was wrong. The wind outside wasn't just blowing, it was whispering, as if carrying with it the voices of the lost. Suddenly, Salem stopped in his tracks and turned around. Camel was no longer behind him. He was just there a moment ago, but now, gone. Panic crept into Salem's chest. Camel wasn't the type to wander off, especially in this place. This was a place you didn't leave each other alone, not at night, not in the dark. Camel? Salem called out, his voice shaky, barely audible against the howling wind. No answer. He took a few steps back the way he came, looking around frantically, his heart beginning to race. And then, there it was. Blood. Droplets of blood, scattered on the floor, leading down the hallway like a trail of breadcrumbs. Slowly, with a growing sense of dread, Salem followed the trail. Each step felt heavier, the air around him thickening, suffocating him. The smell hit him next, coppery, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. The trail led him to the old autopsy room, a place that hadn't been used in years. The door was slightly ajar, the dim light from a single flickering bulb casting long, dancing shadows on the floor. The blood led inside. Salem froze. Something was wrong. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to leave. But Camel was his friend, he couldn't just abandon him. Slowly, he reached out, pushing the door open further. It creaked, a sound so loud in the silence it was like a scream. Inside, the room was cloaked in darkness, save for a sliver of moonlight that slipped through a small, grimy window high above. Old surgical tools lined the walls, covered in dust and rust. But there, on the floor, was something else. A doll. A small, battered, blood-soaked doll. It was out of place, as if it had been left there on purpose. Salem's breath caught in his throat. The doll's eyes, though cracked and worn, seemed to stare at him, mocking him. He stepped closer, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. And then, he heard it. A whisper. Low, guttural, not quite human. It slithered through the darkness, wrapping itself around him, chilling him to the bone. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat like a hammer against his ribs. Camel, he whispered, though he wasn't sure he wanted an answer anymore. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't coming from Camel. It wasn't coming from anywhere he could see. It came from the walls, the floor, the very air around him. It was ancient, malevolent, as if the morgue itself was alive, and it was watching him. He turned toward the corner of the room, where the shadows seemed to shift and pulse. Slowly, cautiously, he shined his flashlight toward the dark corner. Something was moving there, something small, twitching. His pulse quickened, his skin crawled. He stepped forward, closer and closer, until he could see. It was Camel. But Camel wasn't moving on his own. His body was twisted, contorted in ways that no human body should ever be. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly into the void, his face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. Blood dripped from his nose and mouth, pooling on the floor beneath him. His body was torn apart, from the inside out. Salem's stomach churned, bile rising in his throat. He took a step back, his mind racing, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. And then, just as he turned to run, to get out of that cursed room, he heard it again. A laugh. low, sinister, and coming from behind him. It wasn't Camel. It wasn't human. He spun around, his flashlight flickering as if something was draining the very life out of the light.
And then, from the shadows, a voice, no more than a whisper but clearer than ever before, slithered into his ear. "You're next."
Join our family and be part of our adventures. Just click the subscribe button now.